So the world can be extremely emotionally triggering for us and chaotic and just a shit show altogether. And so how do we navigate this reality without being triggered into fight or flight or trauma responses that are no longer serving us? And I'm sure a lot of us are becoming aware of that we are super reactive. And how do we stop that? Because we live in a world right now that is super overstimulating. I mean, to the next level. And I think that the recognition is easy. And so once we understand, then we can overcome. So here are some tips. So what if we were able to reframe all of our trauma responses? What if we were even to be able to pause enough to be like, oh, wait, I'm about to have a trauma response. I'm about to snap out. And we stopped and said to ourselves, hey, wait, is this an old modality of the way that I would respond? Actually, more like just overreact to everything. I mean, we have to get super confrontational with ourselves at some point in our lives when we keep spinning on these merry-go-rounds of coping mechanisms and trauma responses and reactive bullcrap that we've been doing. And if you're there with me, like a lot of us are, it's like, okay, well, how do I stop this? How do I stop in this world that's super intense, overstimulating, always triggering me? What do I do? And the answer is to reframe a narrative from our trauma. Yeah. And so how do we do that? Well, here's some clues. First and foremost, I want to start off by saying we are not downplaying the fact that we have incurred trauma if we have, or that it's not valid to feel a certain way because of our traumatizers and things of that nature. That is not what we're doing. You know, a big part of the forgiveness movement or, false positivity is about, you have to just like kind of set aside the fact that people are shitty. And that's not what I'm telling you to do. People are shitty. But the thing that we're doing in this video is just to understand that it is what we're internalizing about their shittiness, or what we're doing within ourselves, or how all of that old trauma has created reactions and responses and coping mechanisms that we formed when we were children and we didn't have a worldview that we have now, or some of the understandings of how we could do it differently. We were kids. And these patterns and these trauma responses, they formed as when we were kids. So it's like telling a 3-year-old to change the trauma response would be ridiculous. But now we're grown. And so we have to identify that sometimes our least proudest moments are coming from that 3-year-old that has this trauma response, and we're being overstimulated into, some triggers, and then we're responding in over maybe emotional ways. And so there is a way out of that. And to me, I just want you to understand that sometimes, the little nuances that are overstimulating or causing a response are not the best ways to overcome this. It's really just going deep and figuring out what's the deepest one. And that usually comes from childhood trauma. And who is a part of our childhood? Our family. So let's start getting into how do we reframe things that happened in our childhood to not instigate this deep, dark feeling in us that has stored trauma responses, and get into a better narrative so that it doesn't affect us so deeply. Now, that was a mouthful, so let's just do it in a nutshell. Let's just get to it. Okay, so this story. I have become an excellent cook. I was a food broker. I recognized what can go into nasty processed food. And I decided that I was going to start to try to eat more whole foods, actually all whole foods, and learn to cook them well so that my picky kids would eat them and all this and that shenanigans. So anyways, I'm cooking dinner and I'm making eggplant parmesan, by the way. Oh, it's so good. And I would never have thought that before. But so I'm making that, and I'm making homemade pizza, and I'm really going all in on it. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, my kids just don't know how lucky they are. I ate crap when I was a kid. It was terrible. My mom was a terrible cook, and all of these things, right? And then I realized, My kids don't even care about this food. They're probably not going to eat 3 bites and throw it away and say, ew, you are a bad cook. Maybe. So it got me to thinking, a lot of the things that I thought about my mother in childhood, were they coming from my child brain? And then I started thinking more. I was a picky eater, just like 2 of my top picky eaters. I have 6 kids, and 2 of them are extremely picky eaters. And I was too. And it started to dawn on me. Did I formulate things in my head against my mother, and then as I got older, felt like it was a trauma in my life? Because I can tell you about one of them that'll help you understand what I'm trying to get you to understand of how we can shift some of our trauma responses. And that is this one time when I was with my mom. I was eventually taken from my mom. So, I mean, she's not the saint, but, you know, this is about us re-narrating within ourselves so that we can stop having these trauma responses. And so what I remembered is this time she had made dinner. I was probably 4, and she made me sit at the table the whole night because I wouldn't eat my food. And I remember thinking, I don't care what anybody says, I'm never eating this food. And I fell asleep at the table like that. And she woke me up the next morning to go to kindergarten, preschool, something. And I was still sitting there and I didn't eat 1 bite of that food. And she's like, you're so stubborn and picky. I'm sick of this. I remember this. And now in hindsight, I remember that that interaction between us. I felt like my mom was the most wicked woman in the world. And growing up, I would just, every time I would think about food or things like that, I would like, oh, I'm never eating bad food. I'm never going to make my kids eat bad food. All of that. Like, I just my mom is just mean, right? And so I created a trauma about my mother in the way that she cared for me, in the way that she fed me, and, you know, those type of things. But then with that interaction with myself and thinking about my daughter, well, and actually I've caught them, my mom is too healthy. She feeds us disgusting food. She doesn't let us eat like other kids eat. You see where I'm going with this? So no, my mother wasn't a saint, but was a lot of the things that I was being traumatized about in my childhood even valid? That's a tough one. So then I could go to, well, when my kids say that, I know from my point of view, I was doing actually something beneficial to them. I was trying to instigate healthy habits and patterns for them. So as they grew older, hopefully that they would stick, right? And so from my shoes, I was doing something good for my kids. But from my kids' point of view, they feel traumatized by this. Because their whole lives, especially my younger 3 kids, they have only had organic food. And up until they were teenagers, they didn't even have soda. And so to them, it's traumatizing. I've heard them talking with each other. So I started to say to myself, what was my mother's shoes? What was she thinking? What was her motivation? Was it that she thought she was doing a good job for me and I didn't appreciate it? Was it that she had spent the whole day in the kitchen making this meal and I didn't appreciate it? Was it that she didn't like that I was stubborn and wouldn't even try the food and she was just really frustrated and trying to get me to see something? And so what would be the importance of starting to do that? Putting myself in my mother's shoes as I get older, I can do that because kids formulate some really crazy traumas that aren't even maybe valid half the time. Now, like I said, my mom wasn't a saint, but what I want us to do with this example is to understand how we can reformulate a more compassionate stance towards the people that we feel victimized by putting ourselves in their shoes and finding the goodness in what they were trying to do, even when somebody hits you. Even when a father hits a child, they're doing it because they think that they need strong, stern, rigid course correction so that they don't fall into a bad path. And from their point of view, this is the way to do it. And so that they don't fall into something that maybe they went through. We don't really know. So I hope you can see where this story is leading me into the tips I have for helping us overcome our trauma responses. Because our trauma responses are nothing other than a trigger from an old wound. And so if we could reframe the wound into a compassionate place that we weren't actually traumatized, then we would walk free of any future triggers. So what I could do to take this one step further is to say, wow, my mom was in extreme poverty. She was a single mother. She had gotten pregnant at 15. My father cheated on her in high school while she was pregnant at home. Married that person. Never came back to my mom. And she was devastated. And then she's on her own, very young. I mean, if I was 4, my mom was probably about 19. Wow. I didn't even put that into my compassion for my mom response. And so, and I could just go on and on because my family, they weren't the teaching, nurturing kind. So did anybody even teach her how to cook? Was she just a 19-year-old that didn't know how to cook, doing the best she could, and super triggered by her situation of being alone with a small child, not knowing how to navigate the reality? Do you see what I'm doing here? I'm finding compassion, and I can feel the angst inside me. No, you can't have compassion for her. She was evil. But then I can feel that other soft part of me as a healer, a teacher, a coach, saying, no, you can do this, right? So what we can start doing is the indicators in the reality are what we're being triggered by, especially like rejection from a guy. And so then we can start reframing the rejection. Were we really rejected in our childhood by all the boys in high school? Or were they just afraid to look stupid? I'm making really generalized things, y'all. But let me just tell you, chase your triggers, reframe them over and over again so that you can be free. This is the only way to freedom. The sins is, as Jesus taught it, our lack of forgiveness and compassion and all of those higher energies that get us to joy, peace, love. Yeah. So we don't want to keep missing the mark. That is the true meaning of sin and going into the dark side about people and situations. We want to reframe them into a place of compassion and forgiveness. And this is the way. And then our trauma can take on a new meaning. And then that meaning can drive us into a healthier, happier, joy-filled life. It all starts with reframing, y'all. With forgiveness, as Jesus' ministry says, with mine, it's more compassion for. And he had a little bit in there, but I feel like forgiveness has lost a lot of its meaning as a word. So I like compassion. Where's the compassion, for this guy that didn't call when he said he was going to call? Instead of this freaking jerk, he's an F-boy, this, that, the other. That's coming from a trauma response. Of maybe your dad not showing up or, your first marriage failing, whatever that trauma is in yourself. Put yourself in that person's shoes. And it's really important because especially in that scenario I just gave you, there's a reason that this person might actually be an F-boy. He might actually be a narcissist. He might actually be, but what caused that? And you got to find that compassion, especially if you're trying to walk around saying that you're a healer and you're a light worker and you're all of these terms, right? Then why are you defaulting to your trauma beliefs about things? And this is the way to stop that. So you can be that true healer that you wish to be. Yeah. There should be nobody that is invoking that kind of judgment in you if you're saying that you're a light worker, or even just on the path to mastery. So this is the way out of that. Yeah, in our limited understanding, we could have formulated toxic beliefs about people too. So we just don't know. But at the end of the day, compassion will heal that, and then you will no longer be triggered, and then you will walk free of being pulled all around by your environment, overstimulated by all of the energies. You will literally just be in this bubble of the higher energies where none of that will impede you. But where it is impeding you, it's because of the old trauma that's stored in your system, and it's a way for that darkness to get into you. And what I mean by get into you is it's triggering the darkness in you. It's not like something outer is like demonic forces. It's literally something externally is happening that triggers it inside you. And so once you alchemize that, neutralize that, and we're using our mind to do it, Age of Aquarius, you'll be free, because then you'll have no darkness left in you to be triggered. That's the real level up, y'all, for real. The real level up. Then you'll have no more self-sabotage. You have no more, oh, I don't want to do this. I can get up every day free and just navigate the world in the best way possible. So this is pretty crucial. Okay, so I just want to wrap up this video, but I want you to know this isn't just, me over here talking woo-woo, or just super spiritual or super religious or super Jesus or super Bible bumping. None of that. This is studying in epigenetics. This is all of Dr. Joe's meditations. This is literally just releasing that stuff. But some of us can't do it through Dr. Joe meditations. And some of us can't do it by, just allowing everything to just happen and not responding. Some of us, you need to use our mind. And so use your mind to start thinking in different new ways about those situations. Get deep in your trigger and say, where is this stemming from? And let me think about how I can reframe that to find compassion and release that energy. Forgiveness, release that energy. It's not about saying anything to the other person that traumatized you. It's about alchemizing within. All right, so I hope that made sense. All of these topics are near and dear to my heart, but trauma and how it affects us in our as we get older, that's a huge one for me, because that's the one that was hardest for me. I was getting triggered by stupid stuff, and then lining up myself in connections that were stupid as hell because they were, helping me replay my trauma. And that's what happens. The universe will pair you up with people that'll traumatize you over and over again until you figure this out. So this is key, y'all. Near and dear to my heart. So let's get on it. So if you liked the video, please like, share, subscribe. And until next time, take care.